Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone. My name, as you know, is Simon Olive. My role back in the UK is as a management consultant working with business owners and financial advisors to try and help them understand where they're trying to take their businesses, but more importantly, help them find ways to overcome the challenges they face whilst growing and maintaining productivity and profitability. My role has everything to do with strategy and tactics and nothing to do with financial products themselves. And in my 13 years or so in this role, I've worked with many successful advisors and business owners, but never been as privileged as this to speak to so many all at one time. And it's really a great honor to be here to talk to you as well. What I also know, though, is from my experience is that being a great salesperson doesn't necessarily readily translate to being good at business and or a good marketeer. In fact, it's very difficult to dedicate the time to be at the top of your game in more than one particular area. And even as a top salesman, anyone at the top of their game is never as good as they could be. Otherwise, why would people like Tiger Woods need a coach? They always need a reminder of times when they're going a little bit off track, a reminder of things that they used to do well in the past and have forgotten about, but also a reminder of how they may tweak things just a marginal way to get significant benefit in going forward to add value to their clients and their business. And today, there will be certain things that you will have heard about before, which hopefully are timely reminders for you. But there will also be some things that hopefully come to you from a slightly different perspective that can really take a little bit of detail and add massive value to your businesses. So my key objective today is to help you spend this 3/4 of an hour or so to reflect and think about your business as a business and hopefully find ways to help you realize value that you may not be already exploiting. I may also rattle some cages with some of my thinking as well, and that's not an unhealthy thing to do within my role. So over the course of this next 45 minutes, I want to talk to you about understanding what your target market is, but more importantly, really understand what they value. Then, the core of it is how do you articulate and demonstrate that value to the maximum to ensure that customers are fully aware of what you offer them. And then, to make sure you've got the time and the capability to be organized to deliver that value to them. And the obvious thing at the end is to ensure that you are paid appropriately for the value that you deliver. So to kick off with, what I want to do is just share with you a model I devised about 4 years ago working with my clients to help them understand, depending on the type of proposition they're taking to market, the key changes they're going to need to make to sustain current profitability and grow in the future. On the vertical axes, we've got the degree of sophistication of clients' needs and values, and on the horizontal axes, the level of services or the complexity of services required to satisfy those needs and values. And in any marketplace, the more the consumer wants and needs and we deliver, the higher the cost and the price line will be. On the left-hand side of the spectrum, we've got what we call the transactional business model. These businesses have customers as opposed to clients. They solve a problem here and now and move on to the next person without burdening themselves with any commitment to ongoing service, typical of a mortgage broker or a niche market advisor. The other end of the spectrum, we've got what we call the relationship IFA. Now, many of you, or advisors should I say, are sorry, excuse me, slipping into some UK terminology, but relationship advisors who have taken the core financial planning proposition, looking after medium and long-term financial planning, and gone the extra mile of getting more involved in short-term cash flow planning, budgeting. They may get involved in things like this new lifestyle planning, lifestyle coaching, such as Kinder, Backrack, etc. And they're becoming the agent of the clients, liaising with other solicitors, accountants, bank managers on their clients' behalf to coordinate all of their affairs. In the middle ground, we've got what we call the Me Too proposition. Not meant to be a derogatory term, it just best sums up what the majority of advisors take to the majority of their clients, which after an initial full review is an annual review of their affairs to make sure they're staying on track and a couple of communications along the way. Now, we could take this model and apply it to any industry, but if we apply it to, say, the airline industry, you'd have the no-frills airlines on the left, such as EasyJet or Southwest Airlines. You'd have firms like Emirates, Singapore Airlines, etc. on the right. We did have Silverjet up there a couple of weeks ago, but we obviously had to change that one. If Emirates now go down the tubes, you know who's the root cause of this. And in the middle ground, you've got a lot of damn good airlines such as BA, Air Canada, American Airlines, etc. No one model is superior or better than the other. It's how well they understand their target market and deliver to those propositions that is key. And in our marketplace, what we need to be aware of is how these services get paid for effectively. Because traditionally, anyway, over the last decade and prior, most of these services tended to be paid for, in part or whole, by commissions from products sold whilst delivering those services. And on the transactional end of the market, we obviously got a lot more margin to play with as they don't burden themselves with servicing costs. But in the middle ground, we've got some Peters that make a profit, but some Pauls that detract from that profitability in the middle ground of delivering this service. And as costs have tended to rise around compliance, regulation, etc., and commissions have fallen, the pressures on margins have become tighter and tighter, and there are fewer and fewer clients, Peters, that could try to subsidize more and more pools within the client banks. As we move towards the relationship end of the marketplace, this becomes less and less of an issue as they do traditionally charge fees for those value-added services that they offer. But if you are operating very much in the product end of the market without committing to ongoing service, we need to be aware that this is going to be the most price-sensitive area of the market. As products become more and more homogenized, then what's going to happen is there'll be greater and greater price pressures, just like in the airline industry and other areas, as the value of product alone diminishes. So to sustain profit here will require you to get even more efficient in how you deliver your services to them, your products to market, but also be able to increase the productivity of how you operate and your marketing capability, such that you keep the machinery busy day in, day out. In the middle ground, these business models will need to drive out cost. And the biggest single cost in this segment is clients who are not profitable to service under a commission-based model. And this will be to start to grasp how to charge people retainers, fees, etc., for those services if you're to sustain profitability going forward, as well as finding more efficient ways to deliver those services. And as we move towards the right-hand side of the spectrum, it will be about developing new skill sets that can add extra added value to the consumer such that they will want and feel motivated to pay for those services. So, in terms of customer value, customer needs and wants, why should we actually bother? Because at the end of the day, not all companies do. In the UK, there's a very successful comedy program called Fawlty Towers, where the key character in there was a chap called Basil Fawlty, who was a hotelier in Torquay. Basil Fawlty was played by a chap called John Cleese. You may know him from Monty Python, Life of Brian, etc. And he had a very particular viewpoint on how his services should be delivered at the hotel, and woe betide any client and customer that didn't fit into that mold, which unfortunately was 99% of people who came to his hotel, which drove his blood pressure through the roof and had all sorts of temper tantrums. But he was also quoted as saying this hotel would run perfectly if it wasn't for the guests. And I find most advisors would turn around and say, my business would run perfectly if it wasn't for my clients. But customer needs do tend to get ignored for a number of reasons. First and foremost, let's face it, they don't actually know what's good for them. We know best, don't we? They just probably haven't quite got it yet. And at the end of the day, these processes work for us, and if we go chopping and changing them, well, it just causes chaos. And the other thing is, time is precious. We haven't got the time to sit down and listen to all their woes and worries, because we've got to get on to the next person. And so we don't take their feedback. And equally, woe betide us, when we go actually make some changes, we put them in place and they go and flipping change their minds. And we're in danger of constantly changing things. We've got enough with the regulator to deal with, etc., let alone changing things for our clients. And there was another comedy program a few years ago where there was an MD of a company called Sunshine Desserts called CJ, and he was quoted as saying, "We didn't get where we are today by listening to our customers." And we can laugh at some of these things, but there are some very big organizations who historically have failed to listen to their customers. For example, Marks and Spencer's. some 15, 20 years ago. Their customers were telling them, we like your products, we like the fact that we can bring them back if they don't fit or suit, but we could really do with changing rooms in your stores, toilets in your stores, and could we pay using credit cards? They got that feedback for years, and they failed to respond, and their success dipped significantly. And one would still question, some 10 years on now, whether they really got back to where they were before. We could take IBM as example. Probably one of the most arrogant statements, but was if it ain't IBM compatible. They even turned away Bill Gates when he approached them to talk about the need for entering into the PC and client server marketplace. And they were insistent the mainframe was here to stay. And they went from one of the biggest billion-dollar making organizations to one of the biggest billion-dollar loss-making organizations. And they only re-emerged under Lou Gerstner's mantra of 100% customer-focused and cost assassins. So I do ask you, although there's some humorous sort of points to be made there, really think about the degree to which you truly take on customer feedback, seek it, and act upon it. Or do you actually pay lip service or just hear the things you want to hear? Because going forward, it is absolutely critical. Because as things get tighter and tighter, the market gets more and more sophisticated. Every little bit of detail will count. And it's not an uncommon term that I hear, it's not as easy as it used to be. Some 10 years ago, we may well have been able to grow the turnover of our business, our practice, by 10% and know that profits would follow. This day and age, if it's the wrong sort of turnover, we can find that profits go down, not increase. So it is therefore increasingly important to deliver true value to our clients. But how can we do that if we don't know and understand what it is? So what I'd like to do now is take you through an exercise and put you in the shoes of one of your top clients. So I'd like you to think now about one of your top clients, because I'm going to ask you to become them. Don't visualize them across the room. Put yourself in their shoes. Be this person for the next couple of minutes. So think about, where do you live? What's your house like? What do you do for a living? Or if you're retired, what do you enjoy doing in retirement? What's your family situation like? What's your hobbies? Okay, Mr., Mrs., Miss Client, I'm going to ask you 3 questions now. Please don't call out the answers. You can write them down or just keep them in your head. It doesn't matter. I'd just like you to go through this process. First and foremost, I'm going to give you a few seconds between each question, I should say, as well. What do you expect from your financial advisor? Why is that important to you? And what would it mean to you to get that support and service? Now, my colleagues and I have asked these 3 questions, directly or indirectly, of thousands of clients. And in every single instance, one or more of the following words or phrases came up in their answers, every single time. Did any of you in this room, not that it's easy to see, I emphasize the word not. Did any of you not have one of those words or phrases when you put yourself in the shoes of one of your top clients? There's one. Okay. So I think you can safely say that in more than 99% of occasions, if you ask these 3 questions, these words will come up in their responses. Indeed, things like control, security for the family, trust, reliability, they are all subsets of peace of mind. The top answer is peace of mind. The other one is time saving. Clients couldn't give a monkey's how long it takes us to do the job. They're only interested in the time that you can save them so that they can either go and be more successful or enjoy the fruits of their success. What was interesting, though, is what's absent in these answers. In less than 10% of occasions did they refer to technical expertise, and in less than 3% of occasions did they refer directly to product. Now, it's not that those things aren't important, but they're what we call hygiene factors. If they are absent, then they are a reason not to work with someone. If they are present, well, that's what they expect. If I go to see a solicitor, I expect him to know the law. If someone comes to you as a financial advisor, they expect you to know financial matters. And the key things are the differentiators, which is around service and relationship that we're finding going forward. We did some research in the corporate market too, and similar sorts of statements would come up. And I guess here I just want to really highlight this one from a business owner, one less thing to worry about, the corporate man's peace of mind statement, if you like. But very similar, trust, never had to chase, can relax, good service and advice, and these things, whether it's in the personal market or the corporate market, is what they seek. So the next thing is, if we understand what they value, how do we actually promote that value to them effectively, sell ourselves tall? Now, I'm going to refer to some research done by a consultancy firm back in the UK, Ernst & Young. And they did this research 15 years ago because it provides some fascinating insights into why they were delivering a superior product into the market than all their competitors, but were getting less repeat business. And they did some research with their competitors to understand what the differences were that meant they were delivering a better product but getting less repeat business. And what they found was they were all going out and following broadly the same process. They'd try and understand the client's objectives. They'd go and challenge them and take a look at what the issues and the implications were that they faced in trying to achieve those objectives. Agree there were more than one potential solution, but which is the one that best suits. Then they would actually solve that problem better than any of their competitors, outstandingly, and the client would agree there was success. But their competitors were getting more repeat business, and what they found was, around the differential was, their competitors were bigging it up much more. They were selling themselves much taller around the value that they were adding. So whilst Ernst & Young would go in and help them, let's say, improve a process by 20%, and they were proven to be able to do that, their competitors would make sure beforehand they would ask certain questions. So if we improve this by 20%, what will be the effect on morale? And if morale improves, what will be the effect on retention? And if retention improves, how does that help your costs? How does it help your recruitment? How does it help your profitability? And how would it help managing this business? And they were bigging up and making sure the list of value benefits that they would get from solving this one product here, this problem here, would be much larger. So although they weren't offering as good a product, they were getting more repeat business than Ernst & Young. And I just ask you to think about, how much do you rely on your client to recognize all the associated value that you deliver, or do you just leave them to measure your performance and service by virtue of the products that you've put in place for them? Because it's beholden on you to talk up the associated benefits of all the work you do and make sure this value charter is so immense that everything looks really good value for money. Because there tends to be a bit of a value and a payment mismatch, because the things that they value tend to be around the service and the relationship, and relatively little is the product. But in too many situations, it's the product that pays for it all. And in many instances, the product selection, the actual administration of it, is relatively limited value in the customer's minds. Advice itself, generic advice as well, does have variable value in the client's minds. If I need this advice, and I'm a numbskull, then I'm going to value that advice far more highly than if I'm reasonably financially astute. And what we as an industry need to recognize is the marketplace is becoming more astute. With access to the internet, more media and press awareness around financial matters, basic financial advice is becoming less and less value. There's nothing we can do about that. But what we can do is either deliver that very much more quickly and effectively, or we can focus on other areas which are of particular high value. And this is where focusing on specialist advice may well be more profitable to do so. But It's of significant value, but only to those customers who are more sophisticated. So it's a narrower marketplace that we are seeking to appeal to. But it's service and relationship that are key, that are valued by everyone, big, small, as clients. And it's delivering on promises. It's starting to deliver a broader, more fuller financial planning service and offering, and truly knowing and understanding our customers. Those are the things that they all value and will therefore pay for. And to illustrate this point, some of you in this room may be specialist tradesmen, very specialist, focused on a narrow market, and that's fine and great. Others of you may offer some or many of your clients a full financial planning service, a financial architect, if you like, for your clients. For those of you who offer a full financial planning service, I just ask you to think around and consider the value that you deliver to your clients in delivering that. And take an example of a client who's, say, got 25 years to go to retirement, age 40, married with children, say earns $75,000 or pounds a year. Good quality client. Over the next 25 years, what you're probably doing is trying to help them achieve certain financial objectives, to be able to retire with a good lifestyle, own their own home mortgage-free, and if anything happens along the way, to ensure that their family's looked after in terms of death or disability. Now, let's just say this client wants $40,000 or pounds at retirement in 25 years' time. If we take a 3% inflation and a 5% return on capital, you're going to need to help them provide a capital sum in excess of £800,000 or dollars to achieve that objective in 25 years' time. If they've got a $180,000 mortgage, 5% interest rate, it's going to cost them well over £300,000 to own that home in 25 years' time. If they they died, and he wanted to leave his wife and children with $40,000 plus the mortgage paid off, he'd need around about $1 million or pounds in that situation. And if he was unfortunate enough to fall ill or have an accident and be unable to work for the whole of that 25 years, ignoring any state benefits or inflation, that would cost that household in excess of $1.8 million or pounds. And I know some of you are adding all that up as you go along. That comes to something approaching $5 million or pounds. That's what you advise on the effective creation or protection of capital around those sorts of sums over a 25-year period. Any of you thought about it in that context before? Well, if you haven't, what hell's chance of your customers? Because if you don't talk this about it, then they won't know it and understand it. And it's beholden on you to explain that to them. Because we haven't even taken a look at things like where they may get better use of their stocks, their shares, get an extra 1 or 2% here, saving them tax on certain things, saving them a few pence, few pounds, a few dollars on their insurances, etc., etc. And if what you do is by encouraging and cajoling them to make decisions sooner rather than later, to avoid the compound cost of delay, moving money around, help them save at least 10% of that in the course of the next 25 years. That's something like $500,000 or pounds that you are saving or protecting with that household that they probably wouldn't do without the following up and following through of a financial advisor repeatedly urging them to make decisions. And that's the value that we need to get over. And we haven't even considered, in this 25-year period, all the people that we talk to on our customers' behalf, our clients' behalf, to save them time, to get them synergetic benefits and efficiencies, all these people. And if we start to explain that to them, to make sure that they actually maximize their benefits and reduce the costs of all these professional advice, then that's worth a hell of a lot to them. So, having got the message over, how do we get organized? Now, in my 13 years in this role, a key sort of piece of kit in the tool bag is segmentation. Just like to check in this room here, segmentation's been around a little over a decade or so. How many in this room have actually formally segmented their client banks and got an automatic client bank management system in place to look after those clients and drive their activity going forward? Hands up. How many? Still in the minority. This has been around for way over a decade. Great news is, for those of you who are too busy to look after all of your clients, this simple approach will help you grow your productivity by at least 30%. And I just want to illustrate that with a few figures. Now, in our work over the years in this role, whether a client's got 50 clients or 5,000 clients, these percentages and spread of client base will always stack up. Around about 10% of clients are what we call tomorrow's market. They will be highly profitable to us to look after in more than 5 years' time. Around about a quarter are profitable to look after today, but at some point in the next 5 years, there'll be a diminishing return that means to actively service them will become too costly. Around 35% are what we call yesterday's market. They are clients who may have some profit to us in the future, but we can't afford to service them here and now because they're unprofitable to look after here and now. And we need a holding ground for those clients. And then 30% are just bleeding irritating, to be frank. We need to manage them up or out of our businesses. They're not going to add value today, and they're highly unlikely to add value in the future. To illustrate the power of this model and segmentation, I'm going to share with you a case study of a firm I worked with 3 years ago, where they called me in when they appointed a new sales director, a chap called Chris. And he said, I've got 11 advisors within this business and 5,000 clients. And our problem is we have a totally reactive approach to how we service our clients. What he meant by that was that they only saw a client who actually phoned up or a piece of paper landed on the desk that drove a reason to give them a call. I said to Chris, so what's your objective? And he said, well, I'm going to give them 400 clients each, and I want them to see 5 clients a week for 44 weeks a year. So they had 220 clients a year that they needed to see. So I was able to illustrate to him using these percentages that actually 10% of those 220 meetings is 22, and 30% is 66. On a reactive basis, that's how their time would have been spent. But if they were organized, what you probably realize there is that 10% of 400 is 40, not 22. And a quarter of 400 is 100, not 55. They were failing to see pretty much half of their top and middle-range clients every year, which on a proactive strategy basis is what they should be doing, spending their time and focus in that area. What we also know is that the average return from a client at the top of the client bank will be at least tenfold that at the bottom, and twice and fourfold the other two segments. So what Chris was also able to say was they generated around about £75,000 per advisor from the client base, about $150,000. And so we were able to put these figures in and suggest that the spread of that income was broadly shaped in that way. But if we had a proactive segmentation strategy so that they spent their time with the top and the middle clients, what that should enable them to do is grow the average turnover by advisor from 75 to 110,000. That's a 46% growth with no more actual appointment activity. What we should also be able to do is say, if we're now focused and looking after these top clients, then they should be more disposed to introduce us to like-minded clients. And if we do that, maybe 40 would become 60. Maybe 1 in 2 introduces us to someone new in the following 12 months. And what that would enable us to do is start to get top-heavy with the client base and grow the turnover in the next year from 110 to 125. And repeating that process, because we have a system and a process, then that could ultimately enable this firm to pretty much double its turnover in 2 years. In fact, this firm more than doubled its turnover in 15 months. And the key reasons why they accelerated that was more clients introduced them than our theory said they would, but also because they were spending less and less time in yesterday's market, the average return from yesterday's market was higher because they could just cherry pick the best opportunities. And in actual fact, this is open to any one of you who has not previously segmented your client base. Indeed, if you think about it, is it not worth taking out 1 week of your diary to put this in place to get 51 weeks worth of benefit in doing this? The opportunity cost of not doing this is huge. It would be cheaper, quite frankly, to sit in the corner and burn $20 bills all day. So it's one of the main things you need to make sure you do, if you don't already do it, is segment your client base. However, there is a sort of reservation around segmentation that I have, which came out of a piece of reading that I did, a book by a chap called Ron Baker called Value Pricing. And this quote jumped out at me, because he said, any company that treats a customer the same as everybody is treating the customer like nobody. And I don't know about you, whenever you go and you're offered these gold, silver, bronze services that is typically on offer, out of a list of 10 things, there's invariably 3 or 4 things that I couldn't really care about, but I'm paying for in the price. And there may be 2 or 3 things within it I particularly focused on and would really value. And I might ask, could you just do it this way or that way? And they turn around and say, oh, no, sir, the systems are set up this way. And in reality, these gold, silver, bronzes have a danger of they're in our interests as the business owners, not the customers. And there is probably a very strong argument for at least a certain segment of our client banks to try and tailor and bespoke our services. Because at the end of the day, every client is different. They all come from different backgrounds, they have different values, different levels of knowledge, which means they value our services differently and our knowledge differently. And the more we can recognize this, the more we can capture that value add in their minds. And yes, it's more complex to do, but doing it with the right people can make sure we can leverage a real, true commercial value and rate back to us. So in our model, what we would tend to have is, at the top there, a totally bespoke service offering to perhaps the top 10% of clients. You may well have a gold, silver, bronze type offering for other clients who want a service, but at least make them feel like it's tailored and bespoke to them, rather than presenting them with a rigid set of offerings. There will still be some clients who don't want and need an ongoing service, and that's fine to transact with them, in my view, as long as it's profitable at that point in time. But there are others we need to start getting more commercial. If they can't or won't pay the going rate, we need to manage them away to other sources. Finally, what I want to know now is talk about how you effectively get paid for the value that you deliver. What I tend to find is that most advisors that I work with would tend to find that the majority of their clients prefer not to pay fees. They would rather that the advisor got paid via the product. Is that typically the case you find with your clients? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Let's just again put yourself back in the shoes of one of your clients. And perhaps think about a client who was a bit skeptical about financial planning, probably 80% before they met you anyway. And just put yourself in their shoes. I'm going to ask you 4 questions actually. And just like you again, don't call out the answers, but just think about the answers that they would give you to these questions. From the past, what have you valued about working with a financial advisor? What have you not liked in the past, before you met me, about working with a financial advisor? Why was that? And what do you think the cause of that was? Now again, we've encouraged people we work with to ask the 3 questions earlier. What have you valued in the past? Why was that? What would it mean to you? And you ask these questions as well. What we tend to find is the things that they don't like about working in the past falls under one of 2 camps. Either felt under pressure to buy something, or they sold me something, promised a service, and they failed to deliver in part or whole. Generally speaking, the answers fall into one of those two camps. So you then ask them what the question, why they think that was, what do they think the cause of that was. Invariably, they will say it's how they got paid. Payment drives behaviors. We know that. That's natural. And therefore, what the clients are saying to us is they want someone they can trust to deliver a service, that they can be reliable, deliver this peace of mind security. But what they don't want is to feel under pressure to buy and be sold something for the sake of it, going forward. So how best do they suggest they work with you? And in many instances, asking these few questions, the clients realize for themselves that they do actually want to pay a fee for an ongoing service to ensure that they get the things that they actually want back from their financial advisor. Because what they don't want is to feel that they're being pushed product. They don't want to feel they're being pushed an inappropriate product. And equally, they don't want to be let down around some future servicing commitment. So, key message we need to get over here is the benefits of operating on a fee basis is the impartiality it can bring to the party of not being dependent on product. Jim Stackpole, who worked for CEG, was quoted in one article saying, most advisors claim to be client-centered, but in reality, most of them are investment-centered, and their client is the client's money, not the client. And it's perfectly natural that sooner or later, if the only way we get paid is to do something with the money, the focus will be on that. But if we're paid irrespective, then we are able to maintain a greater degree of impartiality and focus on the client's needs, first and foremost. So fees can be a very equitable form of remuneration, particularly on offering ongoing service. Commissions in the transactional market will probably remain for a long, long time and are probably wholly appropriate. But when it comes to fees, what I would say is do not use hourly rates as a fee charging mechanism. And I have some reservations as well about those who use purely funds under management as the means of charging for services. And I'd just like to go through each of those to explain my reasoning why. Using the story about Picasso, first and foremost, a woman was strolling along a street in Paris when she spotted Picasso sketching at a sidewalk. The woman asked if he might sketch her and charge accordingly. Picasso obliged. In just minutes, there was an original Picasso. And what do I owe you, she asked. 5,000 francs, he answered. But it only took you 3 minutes, she politely reminded him. No, Picasso said, it took me all my life. This illustrates that the value has bugger all to do with time and everything to do with skill, experience, and talent. And the last thing you can afford to do is actually have your remuneration based purely on time. Because if it takes you a little bit of time to do the work, then you've cost yourself a lot relative to the value that you've delivered. This lady, she could have done a self-portrait. It would have taken her a lot longer to do, and she would never been sure it's what Picasso would have produced. Clients can do their own financial planning. It'll take them a lot longer to do, and they would never have the confidence it's what a professional advisor would advise them. And what are the two main things they're looking for? Time saving and peace of mind. So we therefore need to look very carefully not at how we charge fees. Because I also saw a very good presentation done by an accountant of all people to a group of advisors on why he doesn't use hourly rates. And the presentation went something along these lines. And this is what he would go through with his own clients or potential clients. If I work on a time basis, all the risk becomes you, Mr. Client, yours, Mr. Client. And I should have the experience to price the work correctly. And is it fair on either of us to enter into an arrangement where you don't ultimately know what you're going to pay, and I don't know what I'm going to be paid? And billing for time actually focuses on effort and absolutely nothing to do with results, and could reward me for my inefficiencies and penalize me for my efficiencies. And that doesn't seem to make sense. And too often when choosing an advisor, many clients focus on hourly rates rather than the benefits. I might be £150 an hour and someone down the road £100 an hour. If it takes them 10 hours to do the job and me 4, the client's £400 worse off going with the other person who appears to be cheaper. So by not quoting hourly rates, I encourage my clients to focus on the value of the service they're going to get from me. Because if I can't charge time, I'm focused on the things that are really important to them. The money I can make them, the money I can save them, the time I can save them so they can go and enjoy the fruits of their success, the security and the sense of satisfaction and peace of mind they will get from having a plan and working with me. Because these are the things that my clients particularly value and want to pay for. And by fixing a price at outset, it's then beholden on me to deliver that as effectively as I can, and that enhances my margins, ensures that I can offer an even better service in years to come and are around to look after my clients for many, many years. And is it actually fair to have my earnings limited by time? It could take me a matter of seconds or minutes to spot how to save someone tens of thousands of pounds based on years of study and experience. And is it fair for me to have my earnings limited by 15/60ths of 1 hour, or should I have a right to a share in the cake of the value that I have added? Because that's where my true potential needs to lie with my customers. Funds under management. I think funds under management, getting income from that, is a good way of subsidizing a service, but not necessarily the pure way of charging for services. Because what tends to happen with those firms that just charge according to the amount of money the client has got invested with them is that what they will find is, depending on the amount of money invested with the firm, that the income may be less than the cost and the value that they're delivering to a chunk of their clients, quite a way in excess for those clients who have lots of money, and probably only about fair and right for around about 10 or 20% of the clients relative to the cost and the value that's delivered. And to my mind, it's a little bit too simplistic. The first thing, though, is we need to remove this underpayment and deal with that issue. But to illustrate my concerns further with this point is I'm going to compare two clients within the same financial advisor's client bank. Both have £750,000 that they've got invested with that particular client. But client A earns 6 times client B, has twice the size of overall wealth, wants twice the number of meetings a year, and wants you to go to them as opposed to them coming to you, and has other various factors around sophistication, risk, etc. And they also, client A wants to talk about not just their money, but their life planning. They want to talk about property abroad, etc., whereas client B only wants to talk about the money they've got invested with you. Client A is costing us twice as much to look after and is driving probably 2 or 3 times the amount of benefit. Yet in many business models, they pay the same. But the costs are very different and the value are very different. And so whilst on this next couple of slides, this is just to illustrate a point, I'm not saying these particular ratios should be applied and used, but we need to think about how we charge going forward in a more scientific way to consider the value and the cost of different clients that we work with. Because client A, the value of the time we save them is worth a lot more than client B. Yes, we're only managing £750,000 of their estate, but we are probably advising them around their overall estate too, although not the whole 3 million. We're spending time going to see them more frequently, etc., etc. So we can find ways to break that charge down, and we may well charge client A something nearer £7,000, $14,000, which is nearer to the 1% of the funds that they've got invested with you. Whereas client B, all those numbers will be less because they're seeking less information from us and value from us. And that may be nearer the 0.5%. And what we will tend to find is, if we focus on value and cost, then we will start and can start to bespoke the charge for every single client relative to the cost and the value, rather than applying a blanket percentage rate, which always has some clients subsidizing other clients. And I have to say that, as a higher earner, that I feel like I subsidize enough other people already, let alone to then be asked to subsidize clients of yours because your model may not be as flexible as it ought to be. But what we tend to find is that we can bridge this gap and actually in most instances find we are worth charging and being paid more than we currently are. And there may be a small section of clients who we may see fit to drop the charges a little bit. So by way of summary, in the UK market, there was some research done by a firm called Cydonia on behalf of JP Morgan Asset Management. And they were taking a look at what are the key attributes of a financial advisor and a financial advisory business that are going to need to change to survive and thrive going forward. And it's particular to the UK market, but will be relevant at some point or other, or historically even, in other markets around the world. All of these things are important factors. Some areas relate to the changing in the relationship that we have with clients, being more around long-term financial planning rather than occasional transactional series of events. To do that, advisors need to think about their relationship skills, their fact-finding skills, because they are very different going forward to that which has gone before. We need to find different ways of paying for these services, rather than being front-end loaded, paying for them at the point of time where the cost and the value is being delivered. We also need to work with new systems and processes to ensure that we're able to deliver that value effectively at the right time. But most importantly, we need to be very clear around our segmentation strategy and how we get the message across, our communication. How well do we communicate and demonstrate the value that we offer? So be careful of getting what we call marketing myopia, having blind spots because we happen to love being investment specialists. If that isn't what our customers really value and focus on and need and want to hear about, we need to change. We need to understand what each and every one of them values and seek to work on the feedback to move with them. We need to have clear ability to articulate and demonstrate the fullness of that value such that they see all the associated benefits and they're not just focused on the one product that they may, one or two products they may have bought. Get organized to make sure you've got the right time to work with the right people in the right way and charge them in the appropriate manner. We need to address certain points about giving away services for nothing and start charging for them. And most importantly, we need to understand value and start to charge more effectively for that value and not purely dependent on product. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure to be here today and talk to you all. What I hope is that you've all got something to allot from this session, that little bit of fresh angle of perspective that will enable you to drive extra value. Please, going forward,
Okay, brilliant.
cheers, Peter.
I'm sure you'd like to give Simon another round of applause for that, please. This session is being repeated tomorrow at 3 o'clock, so if you'd enjoyed it, tell your friends. If you have any questions or comments for Simon, please approach the microphones.
Mr. Simon, hello. Thank you for your presentation. Have you got a web page?
I don't have a web page, not personally, no, but in the brochures there, the MDRT brochures, you've got my email address. If you've got a particular question, and this goes for anybody, any particular question you want to email me with your question, there may well be some relevant literature or information we can supply to you. I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
Hi, do you have any suggestions for accurately segmenting a client base? I have a very hard time with deciding who's going to be my future market and not wanting to necessarily misclassify one of my clients that may have future potential, say maybe a young doctor who I've taken care of everything for them today. You know, where would you put them in the service spectrum?
I think it's being concerned about those people with future value that aren't necessarily what we call in today's market. What you need to do is have some light touch means of maintaining contact with those who potentially have high value to you in the future, even the graduates of children who are, the children of parents even, so that you know that you're maintaining some form of contact, but you're just not drawn into heavy, expensive servicing activity. If it's a case of not sure whether you're making the right decisions or not, that's a case of breaking everything down into bite-sized chunks and making sure that if you've got 1,200 clients, you're going to review 100 a month, 25 a week. And if you're unsure, just put them into the category of still to be thought about, and then they will topple one way or another at some point. But it's break it down. You've got to get started somewhere, and doing a quick rule of thumb will help you to get started, and you can refine it as you go through over the next 2 years. Does that help? Okay.
Yes, please.
Hi, David Balin from New Jersey. My question is, when you showed the pricing model at the end with all the different factors, to me, the pricing model at the end with all the different factors seemed very, but there was a lot of different elements to it, and it seemed to me very difficult to communicate that type of model to a client.
Yeah.
Would you suggest that we actually itemize those things to a client, or just say, tell us what you need, let me go back and price it, and then I'll see you tomorrow with an actual number for you?
That's a good way. Yeah, no, I would not break it down with a customer and say, we're charging you this for this, this for this, this for this. It will be a case of, in many instances, what I tend to find is you've acquired a client and you've got a pretty good understanding over the first sort of 3 or 4 meetings with them what they're going to want. And you obviously know a lot more about them. So you're going to know what you're going to charge them. But you are charging them a fixed total fee for everything. You don't need to break it down bit by bit. And that example was just typically someone would say to me, how do you suggest or how might you do it? That's an example, not necessarily cast in stone as the only way to do it.
Okay, yes?
Do you have any suggestions for how you would transition your clients from a commission-based environment to a fee-based environment? How do you make
I got
that
90 pages worth. So again, if you wanted to drop me an email and you're happy to receive a 90-page PDF document, I can send it to you. But what I do in the work I've done in this marketplace is that with the right proposition articulated as some of the things we've talked about today, described well, at least a quarter of existing clients want to pay for that service. They buy into it. But it is about having the right proposition articulated in the right way and obviously priced appropriately. But more than happy, it's a session that would take a couple of days at least to cover. But there is a report I've done on that may assist if you're interested.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question, please.
Actually, a comment first. I run a fee-based financial planning practice and use a lot of the strategies that you talk about. This was by far the best presentation I've ever seen on a financial planning model. And I'm really impressed. I've seen a lot of presentations on fee-based financial planning, and this is the most quantified piece I've seen, and really brilliant work. My compliments to you. I just wanted to see if I could get a copy of the slides, if I could email you possibly for that.
I'm comfortable with that as long as MDRT are comfortable with that. They may have.
Well, it's for personal use
access,
only,
but,
nothing to reproduce. Yeah.
But yeah, from a personal perspective, I'm happy with that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, well, once again, thank you very much indeed, Simon. It's an excellent presentation. Excellent.
That concludes this program. For additional information on the Million Dollar Roundtable products and services, contact the Achievement Department at 847-692-6378 or visit the web at www.mdrtpowercenter.org.